Last week, we talked about how many change efforts fail and how behavior doesn't really change. And I shared an example of the impact that could be caused by connecting through stories and conversations. That reminded me of a podcast conversation from his work life podcast that Adam Grant has with Dan Heath about change at work. Organizations are always running change initiatives, often failing at them as well. And you've probably seen more than one change crash at work. A newly automated expense tool which has been launched, and people are intimidated by the new technology, so it doesn't get adopted. Or somebody announces, how about a meetingless Wednesday? And your boss is too stuck in his ways to let the team try it. And this gets frustrating. This causes cynicism within the organization, and people develop change fatigue and lead to the fact that, oh, nothing gets better here. So, the biggest obstacle to successful change is then labeled as human resistance. But that's oversimplifying the matter. Dan Heath, who is the co author of Switch, started from the premise that change shouldn't be so difficult. And he says that because if we look around in our own life, there's change all the time. We go to universities, we go get married, we have kids, you take on a new job, you move cities, you make new friends, you go onto Facebook, you go off Facebook, you develop a new hobby. So everything in life is change. But for some reason, we code the really difficult things as change and everything else as choice. But what they realized in the course of the research is that, hey, it's all change. So why don't we study what is the difference between the really painful changes and the really easy ones? And as they went around doing that, they found out that the happy changes in life are all have one thing in common, that you wanted them. You wanted to go to a particular university, you wanted to get married, you wanted to have kids, you wanted the new iPhone. So it all seemed as if it was a matter of choice. But there are also more nuanced cases, like for instance, example, for somebody who wants to quit smoking, or somebody who wants to lose 10 kilos, but is finding it very difficult to stick to that. So there is the want, but there is no change that's happening. And then that is sometimes labeled as resistance to change. So as you start uncovering some of these, you realize that there is a mystery around this. And Dan's research, along with Chip, pointed to three key steps for motivating people to change. And the step one in that was painting a vivid picture of why change is needed. And he shares that with an example about this person, John Stegner, who's a finance executive working with John Deere, the company which makes a lot of farm equipment and construction equipment, and they own a lot of factories. Now, each factory was wasting money buying their own supplies. So Stegner wanted to streamline the buying habits, and he believed that streamlining that would lead to a cost saving of 1 billion US dollars over 5 years. Now he went and collected all the data, being the finance guy that he is, and then he went and talked to his colleagues and unveiled his analysis triumphantly, and then nothing happened. It was not even that he was opposed as much. They just kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, oh, John, yeah, that's interesting. And that's when Stegner realized that he needed a new strategy. So he got an intern and he said, let's focus on one item. And he got the intern to collect rubberized gloves across all factories. And what he found was really interesting. The intern collected samples from 14 factories. A totally 424 different gloves were collected. The same glove from the same vendor in different factories had different prices. And what John did was, along with the intern, actually labeled all the gloves with the factory it came from, the price that was paid, and the supplier who supplied it. Then Stegner took all these gloves back to headquarters and dumped all these gloves on the board table, and he invited his colleagues to come and look at this glove shrine that he had created for them. The executives quickly noticed that although the gloves looked identical, the one from Oklahoma factory was $10 a pair. The one from the Ohio factory was $19 a pair. They said, "Oh my God, John, we are really paying radically different prices for the same kind of gloves." And they all walked out of the office shaking their head and saying, "This is nuts. This is crazy. We've got to fix this." And within months, John Stegner had the green light to centralize purchases. And from 424 gloves, they came down to 24 gloves. And the cost saving was more than 50%. The intern also got a job offer, and she went on to head the commodities purchasing function for the safety supplies. Now, the whole reason this happened was that instead of John just thrusting the data and telling them, he showed the difference that it would make because of centralized purchases. So the giant shrine of gloves allowed the executives to visualize how expensive and ineffective it was to let individual factories purchase their own supplies. And that motivated the real change. So we think that once, normally in organization, we think, oh, once you have the spreadsheet, once you have the business case, everything is going to fall in place. But doesn't usually work that way. The number one mistake of leading change is that we try to change things with information, or we think that if we shovel enough information at people, poof, we are going to change. But people need to have an emotional response that opens them up to change. When as a leader, you paint a vivid picture, an emotionally evocative picture of your vision, people commit to it because they can see the future and they're all inspired by that same image. John Cotter says that most people think the way change happens is 3 steps: analyze, think, and change. And he says, no, that's not the way it is. The way it is see, feel, and change. People see something that makes them feel something, and then they're motivated, surprised, appalled, and that sparks the change. It's the emotional response. People saw the gloves on the table that make them feel appalled that they were making such wide variant purchases, and that led to the change. Where in your workplace have you seen these kind of changes? Do share in the comments. This was step 1, like I said. So I will share about step 2 and step 3 in the coming weeks. Do stay tuned.